and a bunch of other things. So I think we'll place a link on all of our webinars in our chat box. So definitely check them out and sign up for whichever you're interested in. So, we can kick off here today with bookkeeping. So we want to talk about specifically bookkeeping for startups, whether you're doing bookkeeping by yourself or if you are, thinking of outsourcing bookkeeping to Affine Finance or to any other external bookkeeper. Talk about things like, tools to use, best practices, things to avoid if you are using external bookkeeper, how to work with an external bookkeeper and whatnot. So great. Why don't we kick it off? Zach, maybe do you want to just introduce yourself, who you are, what your background is?
Sure. Thanks, Sharon. Thanks, everybody, for joining again. Fine. I've basically been in accounting for close to a decade now. I started out with a up-and-coming logistics group that was doing a transportation brokerage, and I was there from the beginning when all the typical bookkeeping mistakes happen, and everyone's trying to figure everything out, up through all the growing pains, all the way to the end when they were at their max growth, and so it was really just developing all the procedures and processes and implementing new tools along the way, figuring it out. When do we need to grow our software with the company? How do we need to build an accounting team? What skill levels do we need at certain levels of growth as the company's going? And that's kind of where I got my start. I was in it for many years and learned a lot of mistakes and learned a lot of solutions as well. And I'm pretty happy with where I left that company. They were as well, and it's definitely a long, challenging process. But if you can know what you're getting into ahead of time, it will save you tons of trouble and lots of money, for sure. So I appreciate everyone's opportunity to talk with you a little bit today.
Great, great. And just for the audience, what inspired you to get into bookkeeping for startups, into a freelancing model, and what do you enjoy most about working with startups?
Being where I was before, it was more of a long-term deal. And like I said, once it was all up and running, sort of the challenges changed. And I really enjoy the initial process and just getting in and trying to figure out, what do people need? What do you need? What's wrong? What do you want to be better? And then just kind of tackling it on a customized basis. So entering this sort of freelance field is really sort of, I love engaging. It's giving me a lot more energy, and I enjoy the process a lot. You just even down to the debits and credits and reconciling, finding a quarter when you can't find it, all the way up to trying to decide, what do we need to do to lop off this huge cost for the company and move forward in a different direction.
Got it, got it. I'm sure you see a lot of variety as well, right? You work with different startups with different business models. They're trying to do a lot of different things. So you get to see, just from a professional experience, you get to see a lot of different business models and a lot of different, ways people make money.
Yes, and you never stop learning, for sure. There's always going to be some new challenge that pops up, and we didn't think about this thing with inventory in this specific industry. Never dealt with this before. It's just
Right.
It's kind of fun to know that a challenge is coming, be able to see it coming, and then develop something for it, and have it just go through smoothly without affecting your business too bad.
Okay, great. So maybe let's look at it from, a startup's perspective. So this is, again, some people might, say that this is an obvious question. It's not even, it's not even really a question of why you need it. But a lot of startups don't really do bookkeeping. And, we have seen that as we work with clients. So, why, in your own words, why is bookkeeping important for startups, to start early on? And how would you recommend startups, start bookkeeping? Do they just download QuickBooks? Do they hire somebody? Do they outsource it? Do they just record their expenses? Like, how would you get started?
Yeah, so that's probably the trickiest part for a lot of non-accountant or non-finance background people that are starting up their new companies is when do I need to engage someone outside or bring someone in, and how much do I need to be doing myself in the beginning? How much of a burden do I need to take on? Um, and it varies, industry to industry. If you're purely service based, you're probably going to be able to do more of it yourself in the beginning if you want to, or rely on a a FreshBooks app or a QuickBooks Online app or something like that to just get your invoicing and everything done, and it will do most of what you need it to do. Um, but unless you have someone with some bookkeeping knowledge, at least minimal, to be able to build detail into transactions and build the proper reporting for you at month end and things like that, where you can really see where you stand. I'd say that's probably where people get in the most trouble is things are going along and you feel like you're making progress because all of your paperwork's going out and coming in, and you might have money coming in as well, but 3 months down the road you want to know, okay, what was our progress like and where do we stand right this second? And maybe in an accrual based accounting method where you need to take in a lot of variables and considerations to really know where your company's at right now, know what you can invest in, know, can I hire that other person? So that's the biggest thing, is just having someone with a little extra knowledge, making sure that everything's being touched that needs to be touched, and everything's being seen that needs to be seen and being caught. You don't want to 4 months down the road get handed a pile of expense reports from your top sales guy or something like that, and it's like, oh, why did no one think of this or catch this? And you're trying to dump it back into previous months, and how you
Right.
thought you were doing is not where you are now. So that initial tight debits and credits and detailed transactions is just going to help you to make all of your other decisions. So as little as it seems, all that initial AR and AP building and getting those memos in your accounting software and all of that stuff really adds up over time to culminate to something that's going to help you move your business forward. If you don't have all that in there, it's really hard to have a pulse on the business. Simple bookkeeping is not a huge expense, and it's not something that needs to be put on the back burner. Let's say that.
Right. All right. And if a startup does decide to go with an external bookkeeper, right? Say they evaluate, where do they start? How do they find somebody? How do they test somebody? How do they evaluate somebody? If they come to, Affine Finance, what do they ask? What questions do they ask us?
Right. So, I mean, first of all, just comparing bringing someone internally versus outsourcing it is the outsourcing of especially the bookkeeping. And as you go up the levels of accounting, it changes a little bit. But the bookkeeping portion, especially for startups, is really pushing towards outsourcing, and the cost alone is there. And typically with a smaller business or a small startup, you're only going to bring on probably one bookkeeper. For the first, it could be for the first year. You only have one person kind of handling all that, wearing multiple hats, maybe being a bit of a office manager type person as well. But the problem with it is in the beginning, like I said, if you don't have all of that detail and you don't catch all those mistakes early, it's tough. And when you only have one sole bookkeeper, they're usually getting pulled in a lot of directions, and they're also somewhat in a bubble. So it's easy to continue a process in error, or forget one little piece of a process over and over and over again if it's just you and your computer. You kind of need some outside interpretation of what's going on, a little bit of oversight, and that's another good quality of outsourcing bookkeeping is if you sign up, with a company like Affine, you get a team. You have a group of people. You're never it's never that your bookkeeper's on vacation. It's never that your bookkeeper is, stuck in your numbers and only your numbers, and no one else is going to see those numbers. So, that one person is not going to bring down your whole company because of mistakes they make. You got the security of having a little more assurance that everything is being looked at and considered. And in going out and actually trying to test the waters on what you need, it's actually pretty simple. I mean, if you just go with what your business model is, here's the three main things that I'm worried about. I'm worried about payroll. I'm worried about my accruals of my revenue and my costs being in the proper months. Am I doing that right? Do I need to be a cash basis or accrual basis? All these type of questions that you're not sure about, take those to the outsourcing company, talk to them about it, see what tools they have, and then they will in turn be able to ask you questions on top of that and make you realize all the things you weren't thinking about as well. It's really a sort of diagnostic give and take process when you're out looking for the outsourced bookkeeping. And what's great about it is you can customize exactly what you need, pay for only what you need within your company. It's not a broad payment plan out there that says, all right, if your bookkeeping, it's this much per hour, and whatever needs to be done, and that's what's going to be done in this amount of time. It's very customized, so you don't have to spend $50,000 a year on a bookkeeper internally with benefits and all this. You can, you could spend between $1,500 and $3,000 a month and keep your costs down. It's very advantageous, and like I said, it's kind of where everything's pushing to.
And one thing I would add for outsourcing as well is, so individuals such as yourself, you do bookkeeping day in, day out, right? So you're not an office manager and an EA and a bunch of other roles together. And you doing bookkeeping for startups, you're seeing different business models. You have been seeing different business models for the last, how many ever years. So they're also getting that experience, right? They're also getting that expertise, that experience, that efficiency that comes with, that comes with outsourcing bookkeeping versus, hiring this catch-all person who may take 3 times the amount of time and may not even, may not know how to classify transactions and whatnot. So, so that's something to obviously keep in mind. One thing you touched upon was pricing. So how should startups think about pricing for bookkeeping, right? Like obviously there's a whole range of services out there. You have us, you have, some other people in the valley out here. You can, you might have a local bookkeeping or a CPA office. There's also an option to outsource bookkeeping offshore, which is, send it to India, Ukraine, you name it, right? So there's so many options at so many different price points. How do you make a decision and where do you start? Like what would differentiate, say, a $5 an hour bookkeeper to a $50 an hour bookkeeper?
Right. So in generally, you're like with most things, you're gonna get what you pay for, right? You hope. Now there are multiple places you can go and you can get a $10 an hour bookkeeper, overseas or wherever it may be. But what is the level of trust you're going to instill in someone that you're paying that low? And also, are you one of 1,000 things they're doing that day, and they're not really paying that much attention to you because if they lost you, in the grand scheme of things, it's not that important. In general, I'd say, between probably, 20 or 30 to 70 or 80 an hour is the range you're looking at. And right in the middle of that is usually where you're going to find just quality outsourcing bookkeeping. But again, it's easy enough these days to look up accreditations of people and companies, see their background. But like I said, the best thing to do in looking for outsourced bookkeeping is to have conversations. You initiate a conversation with a company. And, if you find that you like them and you like what you hear, go and talk to the people that will be working on your company and see how you feel about them. Is this someone I could trust? Is this someone that knows what they're talking about, that's going to care, basically. And, if you find that you like them and you like what you hear, go and talk to the people that will be working on your company and see how you feel about them. Is this someone I could trust? Is this someone that knows what they're talking about, that's going to care, basically. And, if you find that you like them and you like what you hear, go and talk to the people that will be working on your company and see how you feel about them. Is this someone I could trust? Is this someone that knows what they're talking about, that's going to care, basically. And, and that's the biggest thing. I mean, that's the biggest thing. Just trying to find the quality out there is,
Yeah.
there's a lot of people can do bookkeeping services for you, but trying to find the quality, trying to find somebody that's actually also going to look for things that can help you along the way. That's really the difference maker.
I think the one thing that I would highlight here too is the downside of using a low quality bookkeeper, right? So it'll hurt your business, it'll hurt you during tax time. So there's a lot of downsides to
Oh yeah,
trying to get it done, but there's no real, I mean, you're just hurting yourself. You're better off just not doing bookkeeping at that point.
right. I mean,
Um,
like we discussed before. I mean, that initiating point for your business, and not even
right.
keeping up with the bookkeeping there and quality bookkeeping is it's the same sort of thing. I mean, you bring in a low quality bookkeeper even 5 years into your business, and they start taking over things and doing things a little bit different than they've been done in the past, and you find out 6 months or a year later that, oh, none of these things have been reconciled, or they've been reconciled, but they just made up a bunch of dummy entries to make everything match up, or they didn't
Yeah.
include all of our classifications and locations for our credit card purchases and all these things. These things can really add up, and then you're backtracking, trying to figure things out, trying to see where you really stand, and that's extra labor, extra hours, extra money you have to pay in the long run.
Okay, great. So, if someone wants to start out and, do it themselves in the beginning, what tools would you recommend? Is it, I know QuickBooks has like 80% market share, but there are a lot of others, right? There's Xero, I think the Zoho has a bookkeeping
Mm-hmm.
software. There are a few free ones out there. Are there any
Right.
specific tools that you recommend?
Yeah. So, I mean, in general, I have the most experience with QuickBooks, and I wouldn't recommend desktop QuickBooks to anyone that doesn't have a really good accounting background, because desktop QuickBooks it's amazing. It all the things you can do in there across the board, but it also leaves a lot of room for error if you don't know exactly what you're doing everywhere. It's easy to sort of mix things up and make things disappear or dump things in improper accounts. What's great about these newer sort of platforms with the apps like QuickBooks Online version of QuickBooks, it's much more user friendly. It's much more sort of drag and drop, and here are your choices for what you can do. It's not just an open sandbox basically like QuickBooks Desktop is. That being said, there's Xero. I've heard good things about Xero, especially people that use Macs, because Macs tend to have a problem with detail, I guess, in accounting softwares. I've never really worked with Macs very much myself, but from what I hear, Xero's great for a Mac setup. It's the one accounting software where you can actually maximize everything they do on a PC or on Mac. Um, and you've got things like Zoho Books is mostly used or advantageous for very small sort of startups or businesses, or very strict need based, just service based, simplified books, or not a lot of activity. It's got a little bit of scalability, but if you're looking to really grow your business and add on entities and do different things, or not really know where you're going to end up and want to be able to grow out that way, I would probably go with one of the more substantial software packages, like a QuickBooks Online or Xero. FreshBooks is a big one that I don't have much experience with either, but I've looked into it a lot, and I've talked with a lot of other accountants about it, and they seem to really like it
Right.
for clients and startups and people that don't have
We
a lot of
are, even at
control.
Affine, we are actually considering FreshBooks for our invoicing solution. So we definitely, you know, would give a shout out to them. Okay,
Yeah,
great. What
it's pretty
about
amazing.
payroll services like Gusto and stuff? Is that something that you would recommend to startups, or is that something that is best done by a bookkeeper in-house, or AR, AP, payroll, or is that something that you'd recommend outsourcing to different entities? Because I think at some point, founders subscribe to so many different services, even like outside of the accounting world, like you have your CRM, your sales softwares, your lead gen softwares and whatnot. So it just gets to a point where you just don't want to subscribe to another thing anymore.
Sure, sure. Um, and for the most part, I would I would preach, keeping my logins and my softwares to a minimum for sure. Find the software that can do more for you. But when it comes to payroll, that is one of the big innovations in the last few years that has really sort of taken over is the Gustos and ADP and things taking on your payroll for you, and they handle all the liability of it, which is amazing. And if you are doing an outsourcing, bookkeeping or accounting, um, you know, those, like a Affine, those companies will usually take care of that for you. It's not something you'll have to do separately. So you have Affine over here and Gusto over here. You can run the Gusto for you. But what's great about it is it's all automated on their end and very low cost on those type of services nowadays. And I would strongly recommend using one of those services just for strictly for payroll. I mean, unless you have a very simplified payroll and you're just cutting commission checks or something like that. But it is really nice to take all that state tax and all the 401k and all that liability and put it over here, and then they'll do the processing for it, and then your accountant can be responsible for making sure it's right in your system. Once it's all processed out, and just get the
Got
proper
it.
entries in.
Okay, great. And then we have a question here from Brandon. This is a great question. It's on my list as well. So, if you are outsourcing bookkeeping, how would the information flow look like between a freelancer and a client? Is it, am I just snapping pictures of my expenses and emailing them to a bookkeeper? Or, I mean, obviously today it's probably more automated, right? So the bookkeeper has access to your QuickBooks. Probably all your systems are hooked up to QuickBooks, and you're basically, unless you are using cash for transactions at this point and getting paper receipts, there's no real need for expenses. Is that the right understanding?
Yeah, so I mean, in general, especially just with basic bookkeeping, there shouldn't need to be a whole lot of communication except when the bookkeeper hits a speed bump and just isn't sure if this needs to be allocated to this place. Was this, did the owner go and spend $1,000 at this restaurant for the company, or that took the family out and forgot which card he was using, type of thing. But other than that, I mean, with the integration between even the newer accounting softwares and things that are coming up, I mean, you can take a bill.com and integrate it into QuickBooks Online, and they can scan in their own documentation into bill.com, and you're alerted when it's there, and then you take care of the payment and the entry into QuickBooks and all of that. They literally just took a picture on their app on their phone and uploaded it, and you took it all from there. And things like that really minimize the need for communication and just the minutia of like small talk about day-to-day activities. It really allows you to outsource bookkeeping to the fullest extent these days. And like I said, the occasional email is really all you'll need
Right.
until you get into the reporting and the analysis and things like that. Obviously, you have a lot more communication there.
Okay, great. Great, and I think that kind of brings me to another question. Again, for outsourced bookkeeping, is do you have a recommendation for startups on when to close their books, monthly or quarterly? Because I think that's another question that comes up a lot when people call us for bookkeeping services.
Right. Yeah, and that's something that has been a question for a long time. I think it's more turning into just the status quo of closing monthly these days, just with just all the technology and the ease of use for people to outsource or keep up with things on their phone. These different programs and online services you can use. You really it's a lot simpler and quicker to just close monthly now, and it's
Mhm.
very advantageous for you as a business to close as often as you can, because you're reconciling all of your accounts, you're keeping all of your credit cards in order, all your bank accounts in order, all of your loans. You're making sure that even that $12 interest that you need to accrue is going in there. I would highly recommend closing every month unless you have a very slow moving, low activity business, that it would just be sort of monotonous to go through all those steps every month. But in general, I'd say that 95% of the people should just plan on closing monthly. It's going to help you with your reporting. It's going to help you know where you are. It's going to keep you clean.
Exactly.
It's going to be better for the long run.
Okay, great. And then another, confusion a lot of people have is, should we do cash or accrual accounting? And I think most Silicon Valley startups do fall under the accrual bucket, but a lot of founders have the question, why can't we do cash accounting? It's cheaper, it's faster, and do we really need to spend, twice the amount of time and money to be able to get our numbers and adjustments a little bit right?
Right. So this is another area where it kind of all comes down to, do I want to be able to see how my business has been progressing and be able to project out what it's going to do in the future? So with a cash basis, what you're doing is you're recognizing all of your revenue and all of your costs in your books. It's all happening when actual cash trades hands. So if you have an invoice out there for $5,000 and you don't get paid on it for 90 to 100 days, you're recognizing that 90 to 100 days from then. You're recognizing that when you get paid on it. So imagine you're at the end of December. Imagine you send out an invoice for the $5,000 and you don't get paid on it until March. Well, for book purposes and tax purposes, you're recognizing that in March. Now, say you do that for 3 years, back and forth, with your revenue and your cost, and you go back and look at your 3 years of business and growth. Now you're gonna always know how much cash you have on hand. That's the big perk of it. You're always gonna know how much cash do I have right now, and that's what you'll have. But the problem is, you go back and look at that 3 years, and you're just seeing sporadic payments and revenue and cost whenever the vendors and customers decided to make that happen for you. So it really throws off your ability to analyze your business. It throws off your ability to make budgets, efficiently, and it kind of all, like I said, it all comes back to just being able to know where you stand and how your business is growing, how you're doing. It's going to be a lot easier to make business decisions if you're accruing everything back to the proper months, and it kind of breaks all the noise out. Because you might have a really good collections month and get in a ton of money in the cash basis, and you think you're doing really well, but you extrapolate that out over that 6-month span, and you see that your business has kind of been faltering, or it's even been going down, even though you just got all this money in. So that the accrual basis really, if you're looking to be detail and oriented, see where your business is going, be able to make good decisions, the accrual basis is definitely the way to go.
Got it. And I think, going off of the same question, what is the ideal report or deliverable that a bookkeeper can give the CEO at the end of the month? Is it your, high-level P&L? This is your revenue, expenses, and profits, and this is how much cash you have? Or is there, what should CEOs expect?
Yeah. So the best thing that I like to see myself, or to give a CFO, or a CEO would be, first your month's profit and loss. Then I want to see what were the last 3 months profit and loss compared, and then I want to see what were the last 6 months profit and loss compared. So I want to have that group of profit and loss statements that I can kind of look through, and if everything's being accrued properly and put in the right spots, I'm going to get a real good sense of what's happening over time, and probably why as well, because I'm going to have no insight into the business workings, and why we bought from here instead of here, and why we sold to here instead of here. And then also a good balance sheet looking at the current month versus the previous month. and just making sure that your cash isn't going out of control one way or another. Making sure that your lines of credit or your loans or whatever debt you have, other assets aren't jumping around. And the balance sheet, looking at the balance sheet is more, you're kind of always going to know where you stand with your balance sheet, with your assets and your liabilities, because they're not moving that much, right? Aside from your AR and your AP. So looking at the balance sheet is a very good indicator too of something being done wrong on the bookkeeping side, being able to catch that. So it's another great report for being able to ask questions like, why did this drop 30,000? We make $3,000 a month payments. Why did it drop 30,000 from month to month? And it's a good way to find little eggs in there and things. But the P&Ls are really where you're looking at your operations and seeing how those extra hires are affecting your business, and how the new free employee lunches every week, that added cost, like how they're coming into play, and you can break down your percentages of your revenue and get into your budgets and things like that. And there's a lot you can do with the P&Ls based on your industry and your business. Different ways of looking at your P&Ls is definitely going to help you, make your decisions and see where you're at.
Okay, great. We actually have another audience question. So at what point would you recommend bringing on a higher level person, right? A controller, a CFO? How do you evolve, like as you scale, how do you evolve your, expertise and your professionals on your team?
Right. So basically, with your size, I mean, obviously with your revenue scaling up, you're going to want to scale up your team as well, because you're going to have just a lot more detail that's going to have to be paid attention to, and then you're going to need to start thinking about big decisions like moving accounting softwares. You need to go from QuickBooks to Greater Plains because you've gotten way too big, and all these new processes that need to be implemented and things like that. And also, in general, you probably need to have a CPA level type person at least to consult with in the first few years if you don't have one on your staff. I mean, you can get by with having a bookkeeper, outsourcing a bookkeeper, but I would also strongly suggest outsourcing a CPA at minimum, just for tax purposes. You want to know that your business decisions based off of your good bookkeeping are going in the right direction, and that we're maybe for whatever your business is, doing a cash basis for tax reasons is going to be more advantageous for you in the first 3 years, just the way that your cash flow is. And you can kind of kick the can down the road on taxes a little bit or something like that. So certainly your size, but I would say the biggest way to really tell in the moment if you need to move up or expand your accounting team is ask what you have or who you have at the moment. Ask them questions, and if they can't answer those questions, then you know that you need someone that can come up a little higher and get to those type of questions, that next level of questions. So when you start having those next level questions, and it's not just starting my business type of questions and getting my chart of accounts ready and making sure my books are clean and my bank accounts are clean and everything, then that's when you want to start thinking about that. Getting someone with a little more knowledge outside of just the bookkeeping that can really analyze it with you. Someone that can act as a CFO even, or sit in with you and break things down, and you can see the movement on the balance sheet, ask them, and they can tell you why. Whereas a bookkeeper is just going to say, well, I got handed this paper and had to enter this transaction, so it moved up 40,000. Whereas someone with a little more experience is going to know the why, like the why that transaction came up and why we needed to do it and why it was booked this way, and how that's going to affect us in the long run, how it's going to affect us for tax season.
Got it. Okay, great. And then I think a last question for you here is, if a potential client comes up to you, what would you ask them? How would you determine if they're a good fit for you, if you're a good fit for them? And, what would be your pitch to them? Like, why should they work with you?
Well, I'd say that, I would first tell them that outsourcing through a company like Affine is for all the reasons we've said previously, the advantageous reasons for getting ahead of it. But as far as diagnosing them, I would just kind of ask what their intentions are with their company, where they're at right now, and have they gone any period of time with no sort of oversight of what they've been doing. Um, it's kind of a tough question without knowing the particulars of each individual. So I mean that's kind of where you got to go. I guess you got to get into the detail, the minutia with them, and ask particulars and what's going wrong, what's going right, and then just be able to, from their reactions, got to kind of pick apart their processes and see what they're doing and what they're not doing. Because there's just a lot of stuff out there, like we've discussed, payroll and reconciliations and all these things you might not necessarily think about. Um,
Yep.
but
Okay.
yeah, just kind of got to try to assess what they know and what they need.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Awesome. I think that's all the questions we had. I just wanted to give everybody like a 2-minute intro on Affine Finance and who we are and what we do, just so that everybody has some idea of who they're talking to. So so this is, and I think we'll have our link to these slides in the chat box as well. So this is us in a nutshell. We are a marketplace, curated marketplace for financial services. You can think of us as a Uber for financial services or a Upwork for financial services, basically connecting companies and people who need financial services to finance and accounting professionals. A couple of things we do are here on the screen. We have our startup CFO, fundraising support, M&A, bookkeeping, FP&A, and strategy. We have added a lot more services since then, since the slide was made, specifically in ICOs and crypto, in the crypto space. Happy to talk about it offline. Yeah, and then, these are all the points that I think Zak touched upon where, why working with a company like Affine is more beneficial than hiring, a catch-all person or trying to, do it yourself and hack it together yourself. We have a very stringent process for onboarding experts. Again, we can talk to you more about it on a call if needed, but on the screen you can see a very high level, process that we do, that we make our experts go through in order to get accepted to the platform. And this kind of helps give our customers the peace of mind that the people they're working with have been vetted, have the experience that they need, and just not some random people we picked off the street. Great. These are some of our bookkeepers. This is some of their experience. Again, Zak is a great example of what we have to offer. Yeah, this is a little bit of our pricing. Again, we can send you this deck. We generally estimate, small businesses need around 5 to 10 hours a month on an outsourced basis. Early stage startups, startups which have raised a little bit of money, or SaaS businesses, they need around 12 to 15 hours, and then mid-stage startups need around 20 to 30 hours per month. But again, this is our estimation, and your specific estimate would depend, based on your circumstances and based on how complex your books and business processes are. I think that's pretty much it. So if you want to work with us, you can call us, or you can email us at contact@affine.finance. We also have a phone number on our website. Yeah, and it's pretty simple to get started. We, unlike Upwork, we don't give you a list of bookkeepers to browse through and to test and evaluate and get proposals from. We actually match you to someone who is best suited for you. So, if you are a SaaS business in e-commerce, for example, we will find you a bookkeeper that has SaaS experience, that has e-commerce experience, and that is perfect for your needs and has availability to work with you. So, that's basically how we differentiate ourselves from other platforms out there. Great. I think this has been great. Zak, thank you so much for joining us. And we hope to see everybody next weekend on our CFO webinar. Thank you, everybody.